Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we are continuing with my bite-sized archaeology series, and we're continuing our mini theme of how archaeologists find sites. Last time we talked about oral tradition and historical documents, and this time we're going to be talking about crop marks and parch marks. Also, before we dive into crop marks, if you're liking my content, maybe hit that subscribe button and like the video. It really helps me out, and it helps more people who are studying for exams find these videos. If you've ever been a gardener or a farmer or done anything else with plants, you'll know that different plants grow at different rates. This happens even with plants of the same species because there will always be differences in the nutrients in the soil, how quickly the soil drains, and even the depth of topsoil between different locations. All these factors can change even between plants that are only a few inches or even centimeters apart. These differences lead to things we call crop marks or parch marks. Let's start with crop marks since they're probably the most well-known. Crop marks are visible differences in light and shadow between crops due to differences in how tall the plants have grown, which are affected by differences in how much topsoil each plant grows in. Crop marks are usually easiest to spot in large fields of cereal crops like barley or wheat or oats, because those crops vary quite a bit in height and because they're often planted in large fields that let us see significant changes over a large area. Every field has a rough average of topsoil thickness, which leads to an average height of, say, wheat crops in the field. But some areas of the field have deeper topsoil, which lets those plants grow taller because there's more soil for the roots to dig into. Other areas of the field have shallower topsoil, which stops those plants growing as tall as the rest of the field because there's less soil for the roots to grow in. Some of these differences happen naturally, but archaeological remains also cause these growth differences. Let's say we have a small house like this one here. Outside the house is a large pit that we use to dump our food scraps and things from the kitchen. After we abandon this house and it starts to decay, the pit fills in with soil and the walls and the roof start to crumble. As the decay continues, soil keeps building up until eventually we can't see any of the remains at all on the surface. Now this field is used to grow barley. The plants in the area where our pit was has grown nice and tall because there's loads of soil for the roots. This is called a positive crop mark because the plants are growing taller. But the area where the walls of the house were grows much shorter because the roots are running into stones relatively quickly. These are negative crop marks because the plant's growth is stunted. It might be a little difficult to see in Minecraft because we don't really have lots of the same plant that I can easily show height differences for, but you can see in these real-life examples that crop marks can show a lot of archaeology depending on where you are. Parch marks are visible differences in plant health and coloration caused by differences in drainage and hydration during dry periods, and particularly during droughts or heat waves. Parch marks are clearest in grasses because grasses are so widespread and they suffer significantly and change color dramatically in droughts and heat waves. This is an example of a round house with a ditch on one side. If this is covered in grass, we probably won't see the height differences like I showed in the crop mark example. But if we have a drought, the grass growing over the walls of the roundhouse will dry out first because the stones in the walls will cause the soil to drain quickly. If the drought continues, then all of the grass in the average areas will also dry out. But the grass over the ditch will stay greener longer because water pools there the most. One really good example of this was at Newgrange and the various other archaeological monuments at the bend of the Boyne or the Boyne floodplain in 2018. That year was very dry in Ireland, and parch marks led to the discovery of 22 new features across the Boyne floodplain, including a bunch of new henges. Both crop marks and parch marks might be visible from the ground, but they're often easiest to spot from the air. Archaeologists often take photographs from an airplane or using a drone, but sometimes we even use satellite imagery. Usually we try to take photos at an angle, which is called oblique aerial photography, because that lets us see a bit more of the shadows as we go. We also tend to fly when the sun is relatively low on the horizon, because that gives us raking light, or light that hits the subject at an angle, so that we can get the best view of the shadows cast by taller plants. There are some things to keep in mind about crop marks and parch marks. First, they only happen in areas where crops and grasses can grow. You're not going to get many crop marks or parch marks in a desert or on a pebble beach or up a rocky mountainside. Crop marks and parch marks also generally need large areas covered in the same crop or grass in order for us to see changes between plants. Small fields might show some archaeology, but larger fields tend to work best. Also, the crop marks and parch marks we can see change with the seasons, the time of day, and the weather. Crop marks will be harder to spot in spring since the cereal crops are often still young and the differences in growth are smaller. Parch marks generally won't appear unless the weather has been hot and dry for long enough to cause at least some of the grass to brown. And in terms of crop marks, if the sun is directly overhead, you might not see many shadows, but as the sun rises or sets, they become a lot clearer. Because of all of this, we usually need to photograph the same site at different times of day or in different seasons because different crop marks or parch marks become visible under different conditions. Another thing to keep in mind is that crop marks and parch marks can show multiple different bits of archaeology at the same time in the same place. There are no layers that we can necessarily separate between, say, a house sitting on top of a former barn, which is on top of maybe a former tool shed or something. They all turn up in the same place. There can be subtle differences between them, but there also might not be, so crop marks sometimes can look really muddled. Also keep in mind that not all crop marks or parch marks are made by archaeology. They can form from natural changes in the landscape too. So part of what archaeologists do when looking at these marks is identify what might be archaeology and what might be natural changes. And that's it for crop marks and parch marks. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe down below. It really helps the channel out. Also, if you'd like some more archaeology Minecraft goodness in your week, I stream live on Twitch every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m. BST, 8 a.m. Eastern. I've put my channel link in the description down below, so head on over and give me a follow if you're interested. That's all from me for today. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!